The stories presented in this video are real, but we have changed the characters' names and altered images to protect their identities. The creator of this video is not an investigative officer. These narratives have been sourced from various internet platforms. Our intent is not to accuse or target anyone in particular. Thank you for understanding.
In January 2014, the death of 18-year-old Heather Malone was discovered in the living room of a Brookhaven, Georgia. The troubling aspects of her compulsive relationship with high school coach Nathan Ellis were discovered during an investigation. A sequence of events that would culminate in a night of deadly violence, betrayal, and jealousy began at Brookhaven High School in the fall of 2013. It has always been Nathan Ellis that people wanted to be around. His charisma and innate ability to build relationships made him an ideal choice for his position as Brookhaven High School's new basketball coach, even at the young age of 28. In addition to his talent, his players respected him because he appeared to genuinely care about their growth both on and off the court. In addition to being their coach, Nathan served as a role model and mentor. Both Nathan's personal and professional lives appeared to be flawless. On April 14, 2012, he married Hannah, his college sweetheart, in a lovely wedding. Hannah taught kindergarten and was well known in the community for her lovely nature and passion for kids. They had recently moved into a comfortable 3-bedroom home on the outskirts of Brookhaven. Although the house was small, it was full of potential: room for a nursery, a swing set in the backyard, and a future full of the warmth and love Nathan and Hannah had always desired. The adjustment to wedded life was both thrilling and difficult for Nathan. It took more energy than he had expected to juggle the responsibilities of his new career and his dedication to Hannah. With her unwavering support and assurance that they would always find time for one another, Hannah urged him to put all of his heart into his coaching. On the weekends, they spoke about their future plans and decorated their house. Hannah even began compiling baby names, meticulously recording them in a little notepad she kept next to the bed. In contrast, Heather Malone was leading a very different existence. She was Brookhaven High School's standout cheerleader at the age of 17. She was the life of the party everywhere she went because to her gorgeous appearance and gregarious demeanor. However, beneath her bright face lay a girl in dire need of stability and love. Heather had been raised in a dysfunctional household by parents who were more focused on arguing than on parenting their daughter. Her mother, who battled alcoholism, struggled to maintain their little apartment habitable when her father left when she was 10 years old. From an early age, Heather had learned to survive on her own. Heather became a skilled manipulator as a result of the turmoil at home. She was not scared to push boundaries in order to get away from the craziness of her personal life, and she knew how to utilize her beauty and charm to obtain what she wanted. Heather maintained a strong sense of uneasiness despite being well-liked at school. She yearned for someone who could see behind her facade and give her the affection and approval she was never given at home. Nathan turned into that person. It began rather casually. Nathan had only been at Brookhaven High for a few months when it was September 2012. Heather frequently lingered near the gym to watch the basketball team after cheerleading practice. It started out as a harmless crush. She was impressed by Nathan's self-assurance and ability to command his players' respect while remaining personable. He was more than simply a coach to Heather. She thought he was the type of man who could rescue her from the life she so much wanted to abandon. Heather's attentiveness was flattering to Nathan. He was getting used to his new roles as coach and husband, but he was beginning to feel the strain of both. Since Hannah was busy supervising her class of lively 5-year-olds, the late evenings spent going over game strategies frequently meant less time with her. Nathan experienced a sense of approval he was unaware he needed when Heather started praising him, mentioning his leadership abilities, or congratulating him. By October 2012, they were interacting more often. After practice, Heather would find an excuse to speak with Nathan, often pretending she needed assistance with her cheer routines or asking for guidance regarding school. Unexpectedly attracted to her, but not wanting to be impolite, Nathan always complied. At first, their discussions were light-hearted, but they eventually became more intimate. Heather talked about the difficulties she faced at home, how she frequently felt uncared for, and how she wished for a better life. With his innate propensity to guide and encourage, Nathan discovered that he felt protective of her. After a particularly taxing practice, Nathan lingered late in his office one evening in late October to do some paperwork. Heather said she had left her phone in the gym when she knocked on the door. She thanked him for always being so nice to her as she walked in. Heather expressed her admiration for him as a person and as a coach. He was the only adult who seemed to genuinely care about her, she told him. It was an emotionally complex occasion for Nathan. The intensity of Heather's remarks made him feel something he wasn't prepared to admit, even if he regarded her as a distressed young woman seeking advice. Despite his reluctance, Nathan did not stop the blurring of the boundaries between teacher and student. By November 2012, they were meeting more often. What began as light-hearted banter in the gym evolved into intimate times in Nathan's after-hours office. Encouraged by Nathan's initial generosity, Heather started to push limits. During practices, she made sure to attract his attention by dressing more provocatively. Nathan attempted to explain their exchanges while struggling with an increasing sense of guilt. Simply being a mentor and a source of stability in Heather's turbulent life was all he was doing, he assured himself. However, Heather wanted more. When Nathan attempted to keep their connection professional, she became irritated because she so badly wanted his attention. She started to put him to the test by staying late after practice, inadvertently bumping into him in conversation, and making up reasons to text him after school. Heather used every resource at her disposal to draw Nathan closer, knowing how to take advantage of his weaknesses. Their relationship had reached a breaking point by December 2012. After a home game late one night, Nathan and Heather were by themselves in the gym. After some time, the tension between them eventually exploded. Their first intimate moment took place in the solitude of the deserted gym, where the only sound was the soft hum of the overhead lights. Overwhelmed by a mixture of shame and desire, Nathan realized he had committed a grave error. However, there was no denying their bond, and Heather had no intention of letting him go. They kept their affair a closely guarded secret. When they were certain that no one else was nearby, they met late at night in Nathan's office or behind the bleachers. Heather took care to keep up her appearance at school, but every day she became more and more fixated on Nathan. The affair turned into a continual cause of internal conflict for Nathan. He hated himself for betraying his wife, whom he loved, but he was unable to break free from Heather's hold. The flaws in their secret started to show by January 2013. Heather became more demanding of Nathan's attention and frequently texted him late at night as her possessiveness increased. She would probe him about his marriage in an attempt to find out if he was not pleased with Hannah. Nathan started to distance himself in an attempt to save what was left of his conscience, but Heather wouldn't let it. She saw the affair as her lifeline and a way out of a life she hated, not just a passing fancy. When Heather saw Hannah going to more of Nathan's games, her fixation became unbearable. Heather became enviously angry at the way he grinned at his wife and the pride he shown while introducing her to his players. The idea of Nathan showing Hannah the love and care she felt she deserved was too much for her to bear. A confrontation that would alter their lives forever was put in motion. What started out as a careless indulgence had turned into a risky entanglement that was beyond of Nathan and Heather's control. How far would Heather go to maintain Nathan's friendship, and what would she do next? To the outer world, Nathan and Hannah Ellis' lives appear to be picture-perfect by July 2013. They were a youthful, attractive pair with bright futures. The foundation of their relationship, Hannah, was always graceful and upbeat. She made it a point to go to every game she could, even though Nathan worked long hours as a basketball coach. Her expanding belly was a proud testament to the life they were creating together. Beneath the affectionate gestures and smiles, however, Nathan had a burden that grew heavier every day. His relationship with Heather had gotten out of hand, turning from a careless error into a continual cause of worry and distress. Heather had developed an unrelenting obsession. Her charming texts had turned into desperate ones pleading for his attention. Her eyes would flare with a mixture of yearning and rage as she would unexpectedly show up at the gym and wait for him after practice. Nathan was the center of Heather's universe. Fueled by the emptiness of her own existence, her obsession took over. She had no real friends to confide in, no family to turn to. Her attendance at cheerleading practice grew inconsistent, and her grades started to decline. Heather's coach became alarmed, but Heather dismissed the inquiries with evasive justifications. But behind closed doors, Heather's jealousy of Hannah had gotten out of control. August 14, 2013 was the day that everything changed. Hannah unexpectedly showed up during a Brookhaven High game. Her expanding baby belly was barely covered by the loose-fitting dress she was wearing. She was in the stands, and Nathan couldn't help but smile when he saw her. In his complex and gloomy environment, Hannah was a ray of hope. Standing on the sidelines in her cheerleading uniform, Heather witnessed the discussion and became enraged beyond control. Given that his wife had put everything on the line for Nathan, Heather found it hard to understand how he could still love her. Even while he coached the game, she detested the way his face brightened for Hannah and the way his eyes lingered on her. Heather watched them from the shadows that night, her hands shaking and her jaw gritted, as Hannah went over to Nathan to congratulate him after the game. The last straw was Hannah's casual disclosure of her pregnancy to a gathering of players and their families following the game. Heather fought back tears as she walked out of the gym, slamming the door behind her. The pregnancy was a lasting reminder of Nathan's love for his wife and the life he was creating without her, and to her it was a betrayal. Heather's mind was focused on eliminating Hannah from the picture from that point on. Unaware of the tempest building inside Heather's head, Nathan made the decision to call it quits on the affair for good. After a late practice on August 20, 2013, he summoned Heather to his office. What he thought would be a farewell discussion swiftly descended into an explosive altercation. Heather alternated between expressing her love for him and scaring him about what she could do if he left her, crying, threatening, and pleading. Nathan stayed composed as he left her tears, which reverberated around the deserted gym. Heather's obsession has escalated to dangerous new levels by November 1, 2013. Nathan had avoided her as much as possible and had stopped answering her texts. Her meticulously crafted universe of control and manipulation was coming apart. She felt power sliding out of her hands, and she was determined to get it back. Heather drove to the Ellis home that rainy day. Nathan wouldn't be home, she knew. He was at the school getting ready for a tournament that was coming up. Heather was determined to meet Hannah in person, but she had no solid strategy. Her thoughts were racing with potential as she drew into the driveway. Perhaps she might scare Hannah into leaving Nathan if she could just speak to her. Or she might discover something, anything, that would help her exert pressure on them. Despite the rain, Hannah, ever the kind hostess, smiled warmly as she answered the door. Although she didn't know Heather well, she was aware of her from the cheer squad. Heather pretended to be courteous and said she needed to ask Nathan a question since she had left her jacket in his car. Unconcerned, Hannah beckoned her in and handed her a glass of water. As she entered the kitchen and accepted, Heather's gaze flitted over the place. At that moment, Heather became aware of the tea cup on the counter. Hannah had drank it while cleaning earlier. The thought came to Heather suddenly. Although she didn't really have a strategy, the chance seemed too good to ignore. Heather placed a tiny vial of poison she had stashed in her bag into the tea as Hannah turned around to get the water. Her heart was pounding at the notion of what she was going to do, and her hands were shaking as she poured the liquid. Heather was gone in a flash. With her heart racing, she thanked Hannah and headed back to her car. It was just enough poison, she persuaded herself, to make Hannah ill and scare her into leaving Nathan. But she secretly wished for more. She desired to completely remove Hannah from Nathan's life. Hannah started feeling ill later that night. Her stomach ached dully at first, but by midnight the discomfort had grown intolerable. With a look of fear on his face, Nathan hurried her to the hospital. Even though the medics worked fast, the damage had already been done. The baby they had dreamed of was gone, and Hannah had miscarried. Nathan was inconsolable, but his sorrow soon gave way to mistrust. The timing seemed strange for some reason. Earlier that day, Heather had unexpectedly and without invitation visited the house. He had no evidence, but the idea tormented him. Heather denied everything when he met her the following day, her face icy and uncompromising. He hadn't seen what she was really capable of, she cautioned. Nathan was unsure of how to shield his wife from the escalating storm, but he was certain of one thing. Heather was not going to give up easily. Though the outside world was unaware, Nathan, Hannah, and Heather's lives were already in ruins by January 2014. The limit of Heather's fixation had been reached. Her previously flirty and seductive manner had become unpredictable and unstable. At the age of 18, Heather's obsession with Nathan had taken over her life, and she no longer saw him as a person but rather as a possession, a lifeline in her devastated world. Hannah's ongoing presence in Nathan's life, which represented everything Heather thought she would never have, made her feel deceived in addition to Nathan's rejection. Nathan, on the other hand, was constantly afraid. Although he had tried to keep his distance from Heather following the poisoning, he secretly understood that she posed a threat. He tried to protect Hannah from the worst of the affair by not telling her the whole truth, but he felt a great deal of remorse. Nathan had become more reserved and quiet. In order to avoid dealing with the deteriorating remnants of his personal life, he frequently took on extra sessions or games while he was coaching. Hannah saw the gap but explained it away as grief because she was still getting over the death of their baby. She started to emotionally reconstruct herself by the beginning of January, relying on her parents and close friends for assistance. In the hopes that spring would offer a sense of rejuvenation, she spent her days getting their house ready for a new beginning. Unaware of the danger that lurked in the shadows or the full extent of Nathan's betrayal, she was desperate to mend her marriage. But Heather was unable to let go. The months after the poisoning had been a whirl of anger and hopelessness for her. She sifted through Nathan's social media accounts for hours, looking for indications of contentment with Hannah in each post and picture. Her loathing grew as she saw the couple interact. On January 10, 2014, Heather made up her mind. No one could have Nathan if she couldn't. Heather implemented her strategy on the night of January 15, 2014. She was aware that Hannah would be the only person in the house while Nathan was out coaching an away game. Heather drove to the Ellis residence with a revolver she had taken from her stepfather months before. The suburban lawns were covered in lengthy shadows from the streetlights, and the area was peaceful. She parked a few homes away and continued walking, practicing her response to Hannah while the chilly air pricked her flesh. It was easier than Heather thought to break into the residence. Hannah frequently made the mistake of leaving the back door unlocked in her small, trusting community. In sharp contrast to Heather's racing thoughts, the house was warm and quiet inside. Her fingers brushed the picture frames on the mantel as she strolled through the living room. Hannah's resolve became stronger with every picture of her and Nathan grinning together. The wait was short for Heather. Hannah came home at about 8:45 p.m. with a bunch of goods in her arms. Although she was surprised to see Heather seated in the living room, she refrained from responding angrily because of her innate politeness. Heather's composed demeanor soon gave way to rage, and she started blaming Hannah for destroying her life. Hannah backed toward the kitchen, trying to reason with Heather despite her confusion and fear, while maintaining a calm tone of voice. After then, Heather took the gun out of her jacket. Everything changed when the weapon was seen. Hannah was clearly terrified, yet she remained calm. Thinking fast, she grabbed her phone from the counter as she realized she needed assistance. Before Heather realized what she was doing, she was able to whisper her address and dial 911 while seeming to fumble with it. Heather's panic broke out when she heard the dispatcher's tremulous voice on the other end of the telephone. She yelled at Hannah to sit down as she took her by the arm and dragged her into the living room. Hannah obeyed, her pulse pounding as she searched for a way out. As they awaited the inevitable police arrival, the minutes seemed to drag on for hours. The air was filled with sirens at 9:03 p.m. Heather's despair gave way to rage. She walked the room and waved the gun wildly, accusing Hannah of contacting the cops. Heather became even more unstable when the first police car pulled into the driveway. Her bullet barely touched Hannah's shoulder. Despite the sudden and intense agony, Hannah took advantage of the confusion to hide behind a couch as best she could. After hearing the gunshot, the cops acted swiftly. In an attempt to argue with Heather, they yelled orders from outside, but she was unthinkable. Heather fired indiscriminately at the officers while barricading herself in the house. One cop, a 32-year-old father of two, was hit and killed in the confusion. This awful night would also claim his life. It was 9:20 p.m. when the stalemate peaked. The police moved quickly and decisively as they stormed the house. With wild and frightened rounds, Heather opened fire on them. Heather was hit several times when the officers fired back. Her fixation and wrath vanished in an instant as she fainted in the living room. Her blood puddled on the wooden floor. The Brookhaven community was shocked by what happened on January 15, 2014. With police cars flashing lights revealing the horror that had transpired, the formerly peaceful neighborhood turned into a crime scene. As soon as word got out about the murder, Nathan's involvement with Heather was made public. Nathan's reputation was ruined by the disclosure. Parents demanded his resignation and pulled their kids from his team. The public saw Nathan as complicit even though he fully cooperated with the investigation and acknowledged his involvement in the circumstances leading up to the disaster. By February 2014, Nathan had quit his job and vanished from the public eye, withdrawing to an unidentified place to avoid the attention. Despite surviving her bodily wounds, Hannah had a difficult time emotionally recovering. She had returned to living with her parents by March 2014, and she soon filed for divorce. She no longer saw a future with Nathan since the stress and betrayal were too much for her to handle. The weight of betrayal and anguish overshadowed her previously optimistic view of life. Heather's story turned into a warning. She was portrayed by the media as a disturbed young lady who committed unspeakable acts of brutality in addition to being a victim of her situation. There were ongoing discussions over mental health, responsibility, and the morality of teacher-student relationships. However, Heather continued to serve as a reminder to those who knew her that unbridled devotion and hopelessness might lead to disaster. For months, the Ellis house, which had once been a place of promise and optimism, was deserted. After a while, the neighborhood resumed its normal routine, but the memory of that night remained, a terrifying reminder of how love, obsession, and treachery can cause lives to fall apart. This horrific period in Nathan, Hannah, and Heather's life would go down in history as a reminder of the terrible results of keeping secrets and allowing emotions to run amok. Everyone affected by the sad events in Brookhaven was affected for a long time. It was a tale of love, treachery, and the perilous results of unbridled passion. A family was split apart, a once bright existence came to an end, and the lies and secrets that were hidden beneath the surface of a peaceful community permanently altered it. In addition to checking out another disturbing case where a housewife's covert affair with her cousin's teenage kid takes a dark turn, don't forget to like and subscribe for more captivating tales like this one. Please share your thoughts in the comments section below.